Hi all, welcome back to a new post today. And today let's look at the meaning of a phrase that has been used very commonly recently, much more during the G20 presidency and whenever India went to address any international forum or during United Nations presidency as well. So we might have heard of the term called as Global South, and even yesterday the finance minister said that India will be the voice of Global South during the G20 presidency. So what does she mean to say that when India is going to represent the Global South? What does she mean by the term Global South? So let's have a quick insight into what does this term Global South mean and what does it signify for India as well. Now, Global North refers to countries loosely like US, Canada, Russia, Australia, New Zealand, which are termed to be well developed, and Global North refers to the countries of US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Russia, while Global South refers to countries such as Asia, Africa and South America. The term has been used multiple times, and recently when our own Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar, said about, he was commenting about the ongoing global conflicts and said that whenever there is polarization, the people who suffer the most are the Global South. So what is the Global North and Global South? Let's have some quick insights into this. So for a very long term, during the study of international political system, the method of categorization of countries has been followed so that to study the nature, features, economic growth, etc. of these countries, and there was a differentiation with regard to development as well. Now, the most common concepts that we have seen earlier is the East and the West, which is one example of categorization. So the Western countries are generally those countries which have a very greater level of economic development, and there is a lot of prosperity of their people as well. But the Eastern countries are considered in the process of transitioning from an underdeveloped to a developed nation on par with the West, and mostly they have been in the backward state. Another similar categorization of the countries on the globe is the First World, Second World and the Third World countries as well, referring to the countries associated with the Cold War era alliances of US, USSR and the non-aligned countries. So the First World signifying the alliance of US, Second World signifying the alliance of USSR, and the Third World is the non-aligned countries respectively. At the center of all these concepts is now a world systems approach which was given by the noted sociologist Emanuel Wallerstein in 1974. So he emphasized on an interconnected perspective of looking at world politics, and he said that there are three major zones of production in the world. That is the core, the peripheral and the semi-peripheral. Now the core are those countries which reap a lot of profit and they have cutting edge technologies. Let me tell you, some of the examples are like United States and Japan, and the peripheral countries on the other hand are labor intensive. They do not have such developed levels of technologies for production. They are subsistence and they are engaged in less sophisticated production technologies. In the middle, that is the semi-peripheral, are countries like India and Brazil that are in between the core and the peripheral. So it was US President Harry Truman in 1949 annual address who spoke about underdeveloped areas. The term developed and underdeveloped became common way to divide the world after that. Dependency theory saw it as divided between the industrial core and agricultural periphery. For them, the related world system theorists, the extractive and the exploitative relationship between the core and periphery was established by colonialism, and this was seen in the world trade system in the post-World War II period as well. So what does the term Global South really mean now? So the Global South came into use when a United Nations Development Program initiative was started in 2003, and it brought out a paper called as Forging a Global South, which played a very important role at that time, and it drew the attention on this concept by world over. So the term Global South functions actually as a metaphor for underdevelopment. It refers to countries with an entire history of colonialism colonialism, neo-imperialism, differential economic and social change, and which are characterized by large-scale inequalities. Living standards are very low, life expectancy is very low, access to resources is very, very less. Another commonality between the South countries is that they have a common history of colonization, largely at the hands of a European power, and so they have a common history. The term Global South refers to the countries classified by the World Bank as low or middle income that are located in Asia, Africa, Oceania, Latin America and the Caribbean. This definition actually clusters all these countries which are situated in the poorest parts of the world. Therefore, terms like periphery, less developed, developing, underdeveloped, third world countries are used to signify the Global South. So these terms can be used interchangeably for the Global South. So when we speak about the Global South countries, we are actually speaking about the periphery countries, the less developed countries, the developing countries, the underdeveloped countries and the countries of the third world. So it gathers together these countries in one category and calls them the Global South, which have a very diverse economic, social, political experience, but definitely they are impacted by some of the same problems similarly because of the actions of the Global North. So the Global South seeks to address all these issues which are faced by these countries which are impacted negatively, firstly because of the exploitation by the Global North in the form of colonialism, second by globalization, by trade practices, subjugation of the peoples and also the poorer regions by the wealthier countries. It also ranges a large number of struggles which these Global South face with the contentious politics, interference from the Global North. They have a large number of subaltern groups like the peasants, landless farmers and the laborers, homeless groups, indigenous people which are very, very backward, marginalized youth, unemployment is high, skills are very, very low. There's a large section of informality in the economy. Informal workers are more in the economy of these countries. So they are explored under a single umbrella called as Global South. So you can see all these nations are faced by similar problems. They are also struck by similar diseases because most of these countries come in the tropical region. So we have seen many of these countries facing diseases like Ebola, Zika virus. They face the worst natural calamities and also are most affected by climate change as well. Natural calamities like earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, droughts, internally displaced persons. So as I told you, most of these countries are situated in the tropical region and they are affected by the climate extremes. Irregular migration is a very, very common phenomenon from these countries, the Global South, and they bear the brunt of the global challenges together on a whole. So these countries are also seen excluded from the membership of many, many international bodies which were developed during in the aftermath of the World War I and the World War II, like the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, and many such international organizations. So either they have a very feeble voice in these organizations, they do not have much of a role to play in them, they do not have much of power to influence the decisions in these organizations which are dominated by the most developed countries of the world. So they aspire to be permanent members of the United Nations Security Council so that they can have a greater voice to resemble the Global South, that is the countries which we just spoke about, that is the underdeveloped or the periphery countries or the developing countries as they are categorized as, and they have been under colonization, and so when these bodies were formed, either they were still colonies or either they did not get independence, so they were left far behind for their representation in these bodies. Let me tell you that these bodies such as United Nations, World Bank, IMF, the decisions of these bodies influence world economy, politics and also the nature of development in these countries on a whole, and so they aspire to have a strong voice in these bodies. So as I told you, as bodies like United Nations and IMF are involved in major decision making, they affect the world in terms of politics, economy and society, and exclusion of these countries in these world bodies is also on the other hand contributing to the very, very slow growth. As a result of the above, the idea of Global South can together advocate to coming together for a common cause that has come up now and is oftenly spoken about. So these countries look at India, Russia, etc., some developed countries like Brazil as their leaders, and they come together to ask them to represent the voices of the global south, so that these countries also can come on the same pedestal of development as the global north or the developed countries. So in today's concept, there are multiple cries for a south-south solidarity, that is the solidarity and cooperation between the global south countries, and some of the initiatives that have dwelt and also have taken a course of the south-south solidarity are your BRICS countries, the G4 grouping that aspire to be a part of the United Nations Security Council, that call for United Nations reforms on a stronghold, and the Indian Ocean Regional Rim Association, which is the border countries of the Indian Ocean, the small island developing states which are affected because of climate change, the alliances of small island states, ASEAN, etc. So see, these are some of the examples of groupings that have formed the South-South solidarity and want to represent their voices together in the international fora. So they work together in all forums, especially in the United Nations, and as they are of the same history and also the same level of development, have the same causes of concerns, face the same challenges, etc., compared to the West or the global North, these countries are now looking at India as a leader who can bring forth their voices to the fore, be it at United Nations or whether it is the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change with regard to climate change, global warming, assistance or development. And that is why they call India as the voice of the global south, because now India is emerging, is having a very, very weighted voice, especially in the international fora. And if you see, many of these countries support India's membership to the United Nations Security Council as a permanent member. So I hope this information was really helpful to you all with regard to what is global south, and I do think that you must have got some really bright insights into what does it mean, what are the common concerns, and why the finance minister calls India as the voice of the global south, because we also along with them share the same history, we have the same concerns today. However, India is on a much greener spot today. We are growing, we are developing because of some of our good policies internally, and so that is the reason they look up to India as a leader of the global south. And if you did like this information, please do like, share, subscribe and follow me for your daily updates, and I shall come back to you tomorrow with my weekly polity and governance, international and economy affairs. Please do look out for it and follow them diligently if you want to achieve your UPSC within a year's time. Consistency, hard work, persistence is the key. And I shall see you all in my next post, and until then, as usual, it's very happy learning.